one of the elements that is critical, and Tarmo, do you want to come up on stage? When we're dealing with something as complicated as a human, a human, is best described, or it's like one way to describe it is really like an ecosystem. So I have 1 trillion bacteria in my gut. And I don't know how many trillion, synapses there's in my brain, but when you start adding that up, we really have something that's enormously complicated. And this complication and how we tend to deal with it is really breaking it down into smaller pieces. And then we break these smaller pieces and aggregate them, and we get silos. And in these silos, people talk and geek out, but people are not silos. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about with Tarmo for a little while is that how do we break the silos and have a sit? How do we break the silos and how do we leverage media as a vehicle? And if you think of one of the elements that makes Silicon Valley so crucially, we always hear about this great talent and there's access to capital. Some people say sunshine. I don't think that matters at all. It's just a distraction. Bad weather is a competitive advantage for the North. But what matters is local media that's telling stories. And I'm on a personal crusade with local media here that, glass is half full, it's not half empty, and Tarmo, you made it your mission to tell stories now. So
I've been probably on a mission to tell stories since birth, I would say. By sheer accident, of course, I ended up in journalism about 20 years ago, and I basically focused on storytelling from the day one. So for 18 years now, I've been telling stories. A long time at Reuters as a European technology correspondent, and now for the few weeks for this magazine, which is basically a startup magazine about startups for the startup community across Europe. So it's kind of trying to find those stories and tell them the way, in a way, as it's on the paper, we're trying to tell them in an old-fashioned way, so that they are actually stories, not the 2-paragraph blog spots on the web page.
Yeah. So one of the things I like design, and I like to kind of get to the depth of design, and at the very start of design is designing language. So who comes up with words? And let me give you an example that I'm like on a personal crusade to, figure out what the word is. So the word for wearable computing in Swedish, we don't have one. And I've been debating, with SVT in Sweden that what the hell should we call this? And somebody's got to come up with it. Either, I as an entrepreneur or you as a storyteller. And how do we do that? And we have sort of, now you have a media, so you don't have an editor who sort of bitches about you.
No.
So you just said, hey.
I'm the editor who bitches about the words, right?
Yeah.
I think they often come by accident. There's been trials, I know, in Estonia to actually invent new words. So some officials are posting the long list of the potential words which we would need an Estonian verb for. And they are having competitions to kind of create new words. Few words have succeeded and people have picked them up, but most of them are complete nonsense.
I remember I was on stage with Om Malik, I think 2008 at GigaOm's, I think, Roadmap conference. And it was just about the time when the iPad had come, and we had this debate that what is it going to be called. And all my colleagues were saying, Chris, it needs to be called a tablet. And tablet, and I said, nah, it's not going to be tablet, it's going to be called a pad. And then it's like, Christian, you can't call it pad, pads is what ladies wear, and it's not the, proper word. And I think we refer it as pad, and in Sweden it's my padda, which is of course, you know, a funny word, but it's that type of creativity that looms. And if we come up with great words, I think they massively affect the adoption of new stuff.
Definitely. I don't speak Swedish at all, but I think surfplatta was also a perfect word.
Yeah, exactly. And so you sort of we've had these types of words evolve, and that language. There's a fantastic BBC documentary about language that Stephen Fry was doing. He was asked that what would he like to do a documentary series on, and he was like, you know, I want to do something on language, but for some reason he didn't touch upon language in the series. But then there was this sort of, when I was digging deeper, I found a talk where he was at the Regent Street Apple store talking about the series. And in that, he then talks about this sort of creation of language. And as he was doing a lot of radio early on, and so he and his friend had invented this word for this fluffy things that goes on the microphone. And so, but I can't remember the word, unfortunately, now. But that process is I think incredibly important.
It's important, and when it happens in humans' heads, it works really well. At the same time, when you have a marketing department to work on the words and push them to the market, it's really, really difficult. I just saw the founder of multimedia computer. I mean, it's really hard to take those words to the market, actually. And you know, if they don't resonate with the audience, with the people, you know, they just don't fly.
Yeah, I was super happy. So I called my company, and the company I created with my co-founder Terho Niemi. We called it Koru, and it's, you know, it's the noun for jewelry in Finnish, and so obviously we can, you know, register that, and then we sort of started digging what it means, and we found out that it means nurturing and caring for in Turkish. So yeah, that's good, you know, for wearables. And then we found this sort of mythical creation story in New Zealand. So koru is the fern when it grows in the spring, and that sort of round shape is called a koru. And in the Maori culture, if you take this symbol and you put it on a piece of jewelry and you wear it, part of your soul goes into the jewelry. I say, yeah, you know, that's wearables. And so then we made that decision very early on, and it's very, very fundamental in our kind of culture. And we're a software company, and we call ourselves jewelry, you know. So, but it defines us.
It does, but at the same time, for some of the people, it might also confuse. Great.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, when I heard you doing koru, I was like, oh, you're doing some jewelry.
Yeah, exactly.
I had no idea. I mean, for us, the kind of creating the co-founder name was actually more painful and more longer process than doing the magazine. We did the magazine in like 2 months putting together. Name, we started to think about it in June, and kind of ended up with a co-founder only in October.
But I mean, but it instantly clicked. You know, you remember my comment when I first like, yeah, boom, tick box. That's fantastic name.
Exactly, and it has something kind of uniting force in it. You know, everybody, we want to do something together with other people. And for the startup world, it's kind of no-brainer in a way when we look back. But there were probably nearly 100 different options we were working on.
Yeah, exactly. So so the naming, you know, when you guys, you know, are thinking of your businesses and starting that, you know, pay attention to the name, select it carefully, because that's something you won't be able to pivot away from. And so that sort of, that's there, you know, to end of Dawn. And I don't also think that you should be too, you know, dogmatic and manic about, you know, do you get the .com address or do you get a good URL? I don't think that matters so much. At least I have empirical evidence and experience of taking over the word fjord. and there's fjords, you know, in 5 continents. But when you Google fjord, you know, our design company came really high up. And again, that also defined, you know, the culture at fjord. So naming is crucial.
It is, and basically with the fjord example, you can kind of you can kind of go back in the language and change the perception of the word, and that's really powerful. I mean, the word apple, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. It's and I think, you know, in this type of conferences, if I say apple, you don't think about the fruit, you think about, you know, what's on the desk here.
Unless you're at the HealthSPA lounge there, you can actually think about the apple.
Exactly, there's apples for you if you run out of energy. So we wanted to share a little bit about you know, this type of process, that how do you break the silos, and naming, we think, is an important way to solve that.